reflective. I'm learning some more information, and I just want to share the journey with y'all. I haven't listened to this video before, so I wanted to do it with my crew, which is you. Let's look in the mirror together. If you are a super religious person, if you do not like to critical think, and you are already set in your beliefs, and you don't like to question authority, I think that you may not want to stay here. Okay? Be happy, be beautiful, show love, and give love.
In 1945, Egyptian farmers discovered something that would shake the foundations of religious authority forever. Hidden in clay jars near Nag Hammadi were texts the early church desperately tried to destroy, including the complete Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Within these pages lies the most dangerous knowledge ever recorded. Thoth's technique for seeing archons with your physical eyes. Mary describes ascending through 7 realms, encountering these entities at each gate. When she returns, the disciples ask the crucial question, how did you see them? This wasn't spiritual vision or meditation. She saw them in waking consciousness, with her actual sight. The archon's greatest weapon isn't their power, it's their invisibility. They operate just outside normal human perception, attaching to your energy field, implanting thoughts, triggering fears and self-sabotage while remaining completely undetected. Every destructive impulse you think is yours, every wave of inexplicable anxiety, you've been attributing their influence to your own mind. Tonight...
Okay, yeah, this part right here is so huge. I was gonna let it play, but I have to speak on this. So remember, I told y'all to watch the show called Thomas. It's a movie. These are the beings that he's talking about. If you've ever watched Thomas, then you would understand, or you will know that what he's saying is not at all just fictional. Remember, sometimes we are, even the Bible says we are fighting with powers that are not to be seen, forces, okay, principalities. This is what he's talking about. And we're not just going to put them in one category. We're going to identify them completely for who they are, how they operate. And this is why I say you must wake up every day in a good spirit and a good mindset, because if you show up unhappy, these entities feed off of your negativity. I have several videos that I tell y'all about these entities feeding off your negativity. So whatever in life is causing you trauma, stress, depression, you need to go look in the mirror at that. Try to see what can you fix about it. And a lot of times it's you facing your own shadow and taking accountability for your actions in that situation. Now, I know there are situations where sometimes you're just a complete victim. You didn't do anything. But see, the part that you own is your lesson, is the reaction. You control your reaction. You may not control the situation, but you control 1,000% your reaction. And this is where the archons cannot have control over. They don't have control over your reaction. Okay? Remember that.
You'll learn Thoth's exact technique. Once you see your first archon, you'll never question this invisible war again. The invisibility isn't an accident. It's the most carefully engineered aspect of the entire system. When you think about archons, your mind probably jumps to some ethereal, ghostly beings floating around in another dimension. That's exactly what they want you to think. The truth is far more calculated and infinitely more disturbing. Archons exist right here, in frequencies that overlap with our physical reality. They have form, mass, and presence. They're not invisible because they're spirits. They're invisible because the human visual system was deliberately limited to keep them hidden. Here's what the Gnostics discovered that made the early church fathers panic. Human eyes were designed by the demiurge with a very specific flaw. We can only perceive what scientists call the visible light spectrum. electromagnetic radiation between 380 and 700 nanometers. That's less than 1% of what's actually there. Think about that for a moment. Less than 1%. You're walking through a reality where 99% of what exists is completely invisible to you. But here's where it gets sinister. Infrared radiation exists. You can't see it, but it's heating your skin right now. Ultraviolet radiation exists. You can't see it, but it's affecting your body every time you step outside. Radio waves are passing through you constantly, carrying conversations, music, data. X-rays can penetrate your body. Gamma rays are streaming down from space. All of this is real, measurable, and completely invisible to your naked eyes. Archons operate in frequencies just adjacent to human visual detection, not in some mystical other dimension, right here, in electromagnetic ranges that your eyes simply cannot process. They exist close enough to interact with our reality, to manipulate our energy fields, to influence our thoughts and emotions, but far enough outside our visual range to remain completely hidden while they do it. Imagine someone standing directly behind you, whispering suggestions into your ear while you're convinced the thoughts are your own. That's exactly what's happening, except the whispering is happening at frequencies your eyes can't detect and your conscious mind can't recognize. They're right there. They've always been right there. The prison design is breathtaking in its simplicity. When the demiurge engineered the human body, it didn't need to banish archons to some distant realm. It just needed to limit human perception to a tiny sliver of reality while keeping the controllers operating in the full spectrum. It's like being locked in a room where you can only see by candlelight while your captors are wearing night vision goggles. You're stumbling around in what feels like darkness while they can see everything perfectly. This is why invisibility isn't just an advantage for archons. It's the foundation of everything. When you can't see what's manipulating you, you can't resist it effectively. When you can't see the cords they attach to your energy field, you can't disconnect them. When you can't see them positioning themselves to harvest your emotional reactions, you can't stop feeding them. Think about how this plays out in your daily life. You wake up feeling inexplicably drained. You walk into a room and suddenly feel anxious for no reason. You're having a good day and then, out of nowhere, you're hit with depression, anger, or fear. You assume it's just your brain chemistry, your circumstances, your personal issues. But what if something you can't see is actively generating these emotional states in your energy field? What if those sudden cravings, those intrusive thoughts, those moments when you act completely out of character, what if they're not coming from inside you at all? What if you're being influenced by entities standing right next to you, operating at frequencies your eyes simply cannot detect? The Gnostic texts that survived the Church's purges contain a terrifying revelation. If every human could see archons, the entire harvest system would collapse overnight. You cannot feed on someone who's watching you feed. You cannot manipulate someone who can see you manipulating them. You cannot maintain control over someone who can observe your control mechanisms in real time. This is why the Church worked so desperately to destroy Gnostic knowledge. It wasn't about theology or doctrine. It was about protecting the invisibility that makes the whole system possible. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the texts from Nag Hammadi, the teachings of Thoth, they all pointed to the same revolutionary truth. Human eyes are far more flexible than the demiurge intended. Your visual system isn't fixed hardware. It's more like software that can be upgraded. The frequency range you can perceive isn't permanently locked. With the right knowledge, the right techniques, the right training, you can expand your visual spectrum beyond its programmed limitations. You can learn to see what was always meant to remain hidden. The electromagnetic spectrum doesn't stop existing just because your eyes weren't designed to see it. Reality doesn't disappear beyond 700 nanometers, and the entities that have been manipulating humanity for millennia don't become less real just because they've positioned themselves outside your natural visual range. When Thoth taught the chosen ones to see archons with their physical eyes, he wasn't performing magic. He was debugging the visual system. He was showing them how to access frequencies that were always there, always available, but deliberately blocked by the limitations built into human perception. The Archon's greatest fear isn't that you'll become spiritually enlightened. It's not that you'll meditate your way to higher consciousness. Their greatest fear is that you'll learn to see them with the same eyes you use to see everything else in physical reality. Because once you can see them, everything changes. Once you can watch them attach chords, generate emotions, and harvest energy, you become impossible to control. The invisibility was never about their nature. It was always about your perception, and your perception was never meant to stay limited forever. Here's something that will completely shift how you understand your own eyes. The Demiurge made one catastrophic miscalculation when designing the human sensory prison, and that mistake is about to become your greatest advantage. Your eyes weren't just limited to see a narrow slice of reality. They were deliberately handicapped through what I call frequency filtering. But here's the critical flaw in their design. Human visual plasticity remained intact. They couldn't remove this biological flexibility without destroying vision entirely. So they had to suppress it instead. And anything suppressed can be reactivated. Think about this for a moment. If every human walking around could naturally see Archons attached to people, feeding off emotional energy, manipulating thoughts and decisions, how long would their system last? Maybe a week? The entire harvest operation depends on these entities remaining invisible while they work. The moment you can see what's actually happening to you, their power over you evaporates. But let me explain exactly how they pulled this off. Because understanding the mechanism is the first step to breaking free from it. Your eyes don't actually see anything. They capture electromagnetic frequency data and send it to your brain for interpretation. The eye is just a biological antenna. The real vision happens in your visual cortex. And here's where it gets fascinating. Your brain doesn't show you everything your eyes detect. It filters, categorizes, and deletes massive amounts of incoming data before it reaches your conscious awareness. From the moment you're born, your brain learns what counts as real and what should be discarded as visual noise. This isn't a conscious process, it's happening automatically, thousands of times per second. Your visual cortex is essentially running a filtering program that decides what deserves your attention and what gets deleted before you ever know it existed. Now, Archons exist in frequency ranges that overlap with visible light but operate slightly outside the standard spectrum most humans are trained to perceive. They're not invisible, they're filtered out. Your eyes are actually detecting them. But your brain has been programmed to categorize their frequencies as irrelevant background data and eliminate them before conscious processing. This is why children sometimes see things adults can't. Their filtering systems haven't been fully established yet, but through repeated dismissal, that's just your imagination. There's nothing there. Stop making things up. Children learn to ignore these perceptions until their brains automatically filter them out entirely. The beautiful thing is, this filtering system isn't hardwired. It's learned, which means it can be unlearned. Your visual plasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and recalibrate what it processes, remains active throughout your entire life. You just need to know how to access it. When chosen ones first learn to see Archons, they all describe the same shocking experience. One moment they're dealing with invisible attacks, sudden mood changes, intrusive thoughts, energy drainage with no idea where it's coming from. They feel powerless because they can't identify the source. Then their vision shifts. Suddenly they can see exactly what's happening. The entity attached to their shoulder, draining energy through a visible cord. The Archon whispering suggestions that they previously thought were their own thoughts. The feeding tube connected to their solar plexus during moments of anger or fear. But here's the most interesting part. The instant an Archon realizes it's been seen, everything changes. These entities rely completely on operating undetected. The moment they know you can see them, they panic. Their confidence disappears. They become desperate, sloppy, easily dismissed. It's like someone who's been robbing your house for years suddenly realizing you've installed cameras and are watching their every move. Their power was never in their strength, it was in your ignorance of their presence. Archons without the cover of invisibility are actually pathetic. They're parasites, not predators. They can only feed when you're unaware of the feeding. Once you can observe the attachment point, see the energy cord, watch their manipulation attempts in real time, they become as threatening as a mosquito you can see and swat away. This is why Thoth's technique was so revolutionary and why it's been so viciously suppressed. He wasn't teaching people to develop mystical clairvoyant abilities that take decades to master. He was showing them how to reactivate their natural visual range through their physical eyes, something most people can accomplish within 7 days of correct practice. The technique works by gradually expanding your brain's interpretation of the frequency data your eyes are already collecting. It's not about seeing new things, it's about stopping the automatic deletion of things you're already detecting. You're essentially debugging your own visual processing system, removing the filters that were installed without your permission. Remember, your eyes evolved to see far more than you currently perceive. The narrow, visible spectrum you experience isn't a biological limitation, it's a programmed restriction. Human visual plasticity means you can reclaim that full range, but only if you understand that the prison exists in your processing, not your perception. The entities maintaining this system know that if enough people reactivate their natural visual range, their entire operation collapses. That's why they've invested so heavily in convincing you that what you're experiencing is impossible, imagination, or mental illness. Your eyes are already perfect instruments for detecting archonic presence. The only thing standing between you and clear vision of these entities is a filtering system you never agreed to install, and one you have every right to remove. Your brain is performing an act of censorship so sophisticated that most people never realize it's happening. Every single second, your visual cortex receives millions of data points from your retina, but only a fraction ever reaches your conscious awareness. The rest gets filtered, categorized, and deleted before you even know it existed. This isn't some mystical barrier or supernatural force field. It's pure neuroscience, but neuroscience that's been weaponized against your perception in ways that would make the most paranoid conspiracy theorist seem reasonable. Here's what's actually happening inside your skull. Your visual processing system operates like an incredibly selective bouncer at an exclusive club. It has a predetermined list of what's allowed through to consciousness and what gets turned away at the door. Archons exist in frequencies that your brain was trained from birth to classify as visual noise, meaningless static to be discarded immediately. Think about this for a moment. You've been taught that seeing is believing, but what if the real truth is that believing is seeing? Your brain literally constructs your visual reality based on what it expects to find, not necessarily what's actually there. The mechanism works through something neuroscientists call predictive processing. Your brain doesn't passively receive visual information. It actively predicts what should be there based on past experience and cultural programming. When incoming data matches these predictions, it gets processed and reaches consciousness. When it doesn't match, it gets filtered out as irrelevant or impossible. But here's where it gets interesting. This filter isn't hardwired into your DNA. It's learned, it's malleable, and most importantly, it can be recalibrated. You've already experienced this filtering in action, though you probably dismissed what you were perceiving. Remember those moments when you're alone in a dimly lit room and catch movement in your peripheral vision? A shadow that shifts when shadows shouldn't move. A shape that doesn't belong to any object in the space. The classic response is to turn your head for a direct look, and of course, nothing's there. Most people file this under imagination, tired eyes, or tricks of light. But chosen ones who've learned to see recognize this pattern for what it really is. Peripheral vision momentarily detecting an archon before central vision's filter kicks in and erases it from awareness. The difference between peripheral and central vision is crucial to understanding how Thoth's technique works. Your central vision, what you see when looking directly at something, is optimized for sharp detail and precise focus. It's your high-definition camera, perfect for reading text or recognizing faces. But it comes with extremely rigid filtering protocols. Peripheral vision operates completely differently. It's optimized for detecting movement and environmental changes that might signal opportunity or danger. It's your early warning system, designed to catch things that don't fit the expected pattern. And here's the key. Peripheral vision has access to a slightly wider frequency range than central vision. This isn't some esoteric claim. It's measurable neuroscience. Peripheral vision can detect certain wavelengths and movement patterns that central vision's processing algorithms automatically discard. It's why you can sometimes see stars in your peripheral vision that disappear when you look directly at them, or catch movement that vanishes under direct focus. The archons exist in this gap between what peripheral vision can detect and what central vision will allow into consciousness. They've been hiding in the space between your two visual systems, counting on the fact that most humans never learn to bridge that gap. When peripheral vision catches an archon, it sends the signal toward conscious awareness. But central vision's filter intercepts it. The filter runs a quick analysis. This doesn't match any known category. This contradicts everything we've been taught about reality. This must be an error. Delete. Gone. Never happened. But what if you could train your peripheral awareness to hold on to what it's detecting long enough for your conscious mind to register it? What if you could teach your brain that these impossible signals aren't errors to be discarded, but legitimate information to be processed? This is exactly what Thoth's technique accomplishes. It exploits the gap between peripheral detection and central processing by training your visual attention to notice what's normally thrown away. The method works by gradually expanding your awareness to include the background noise your brain usually ignores. The process starts with learning to maintain soft focus, keeping your central vision relaxed while paying attention to your entire visual field simultaneously. Most people have never learned to do this because our education system trains us to focus narrowly, to concentrate on one thing at a time, to ignore distractions. But those distractions often contain the most important information. As you practice this expanded awareness, something remarkable happens. Your brain begins to realize that what it's been filtering out isn't random noise or imagination. There's consistency to these signals. Patterns, presence. The filter starts to relax its grip because the evidence becomes undeniable. Something is actually there. This is why the technique requires patience and practice. You're not just learning to see differently, you're reprogramming decades of conditioning that taught your brain what's real and what's impossible. You're debugging the visual software that's been running your perception since childhood. The breakthrough moment comes when your brain finally accepts that these filtered signals represent actual entities in your environment. Once that recognition occurs, the filter doesn't just relax. It begins actively looking for what it previously discarded. Your visual system essentially updates its definition of reality to include what it can now acknowledge exists. At this point, you can see archons with fully open eyes in normal waking consciousness. No altered states required. No special lighting or ritual conditions. They become as visible as any other aspect of your environment because your brain is no longer deleting them before you can perceive them. The key is understanding that your brain's filtering system was never designed to hide truth from you. It was programmed to hide truth from you. There's a profound difference. Design implies natural limitation. Programming implies intentional manipulation that can be reversed. And that reversal is exactly what they fear most. Because once you can see them, everything changes. The invisible becomes visible. The hidden becomes obvious. And their greatest advantage, operating from the shadows of your filtered perception, disappears forever. Now that you understand how your brain has been programmed to delete archons from your visual field before you can consciously register them, let me share something that will change everything. The technique I'm about to reveal has been guarded by mystery schools for thousands of years. And there's a reason why. When you master this correctly, you will see your first archon within 3 to 7 days. Not sense it, not feel some vague presence. You will see it with your physical eyes, as clearly as you see the furniture in your room right now. This is Thoth's soft gaze technique, and it exploits the very design flaw we discussed earlier. Your eyes possess a neuroplasticity that the demiurge couldn't eliminate without making you completely blind. But accessing this ability requires you to do the exact opposite of what every instinct tells you to do when you're trying to see something. Let's start with your environment. Because lighting is absolutely critical. You need to find a space with low lighting. Not complete darkness, not bright light, but that specific threshold where shadows have depth while you can still clearly see physical objects. This isn't arbitrary. Archons become visible through contrast, and this particular lighting condition creates what I call the visibility sweet spot. Here's why this matters. In complete darkness, archons have too much cover. The lack of visual reference points means your brain can't distinguish between what's actually there and what it's filtering out. In bright light, these entities retreat to frequencies that become even harder to access. But in low light with shadows, they operate most boldly because they assume you still can't see them. They're wrong. Think of it like this. You know how sometimes you catch movement in your peripheral vision, but when you turn to look directly, nothing's there? That's not your imagination. That's an archon retreating the moment your focused attention activates the filtering mechanism we talked about earlier. The soft gaze technique prevents this retreat by never giving them the signal that you're actively hunting. Position yourself facing a wall or an open space. Never a screen, never a detailed object, never anything that will pull your focus. You want what I call a neutral visual field. A blank wall works perfectly. Or you can sit facing an empty corner of a room. The key is eliminating visual distractions that will tempt your eyes to focus on specific details. Now comes the technique itself, and this is where most people fail because it goes against every natural instinct. When you want to see something clearly, what do? You focus harder. You narrow your attention. You look directly at your target. This is exactly wrong for seeing archons. Instead, you're going to widen your gaze. Relax your eye muscles completely. Let your vision go slightly out of focus, so you're not looking at anything specific, but seeing the entire field at once. This feels deeply uncomfortable at first because your eyes want to focus and your brain wants targets. You're going to fight the urge to look for anything. You're not searching, you're receiving. Think of the difference between a flashlight beam and ambient room lighting. Focused vision is like a flashlight. Intense, narrow, directed. Soft gaze is like ambient lighting. Gentle, wide, encompassing everything equally. You're not illuminating one spot intensely. You're allowing everything to be visible at a lower, more receptive level. While maintaining this soft, unfocused gaze on your neutral visual field, you're simultaneously paying attention to your peripheral awareness without moving your eyes toward it. This is crucial. Just notice what's happening in the edges of your vision, while keeping your central vision relaxed and unfocused. Within the first few minutes, you'll start noticing things that are normally filtered out. Tiny movements in the air that don't correspond to any air current. Shadows shifting without any physical object casting them. Shapes or densities that don't match anything in the room. Your immediate instinct will be to look directly at these anomalies. Don't. The moment you shift to focused attention, they vanish because you've just activated the filtering system. Instead, acknowledge what you're seeing peripherally while maintaining your soft gaze on the neutral field. Let your brain slowly realize that what you're observing isn't disappearing. It's remaining consistent and present. This is the breakthrough moment when your neurological filtering begins to weaken. Most people give up right here because it feels like nothing is happening. You're not seeing dramatic, movie-style manifestations. You're seeing subtle inconsistencies in what should be empty space. Patches of air that seem slightly denser. Areas where light behaves differently. Movements that have no physical source. This is exactly what archon visibility looks like in the early stages. The key is persistence without effort. You're not straining to see. You're allowing yourself to see what was always there. Think of it like learning to see those hidden 3D images that were popular years ago. You had to relax your focus and let the image emerge rather than forcing it. Practice this for 15 to 20 minutes at a time, twice daily. Morning and evening sessions work best because your brain's filtering mechanisms are slightly less active during these transition periods. Keep a simple log of what you observe, even if it seems insignificant. Noticed shadow movement in upper left peripheral vision or air seemed thicker near the corner. These small observations are building blocks. By day 3 or 4, you'll start recognizing patterns. Certain areas of your practice space will consistently show activity. Specific types of movement will become familiar. This is when you know the technique is working. You're beginning to see past the programmed limitations of your visual system. The most important thing to remember is that Archons fear this technique more than anything else because it removes their primary advantage: invisibility. Once you can see them, everything changes. Their influence becomes obvious, their manipulation becomes clear, and their power over you begins to dissolve. Tomorrow, we'll explore what happens when you achieve consistent Archon visibility and why this ability has been suppressed so aggressively throughout history. But for now, find your practice space and begin. Your liberation from invisible manipulation starts with learning to see what was always there, waiting for you to remember how to look. When you first catch sight of an Archon using the soft gaze technique, your immediate reaction will be to question your own perception. This doubt is completely normal and actually serves as your first confirmation that you're seeing something real. Let me explain what you're actually looking at and why that initial uncertainty is part of the process. Archons don't manifest as solid, three-dimensional beings the way we're accustomed to seeing physical objects. Instead, they appear as semi-transparent distortions in the air around you. Imagine the heat shimmer rising from hot pavement on a summer day, but with intentional movement and vague form. Some chosen ones describe their first sighting as shadows with unusual depth, as if darkness itself had gained dimension and purpose. Others see them as wisps of dark smoke that move with clear intelligence, defying any natural air current or draft in the room. The most common description I hear is of vaguely humanoid figures made of what looks like television static, that grainy, shifting pattern of light and dark that seems to pulse with its own rhythm. What you perceive depends entirely on two factors: the specific type of Archon you're observing and how densely it's manifesting in that particular moment. A feeding Archon will appear more solid and defined than one that's simply monitoring. An ancient, powerful entity will have sharper edges and more consistent form than a newly attached parasite. Here's the crucial test that separates genuine Archon sighting from imagination or wishful thinking. Real Archons react to your attention. The moment you perceive one clearly, really see it, and focus your awareness on its presence, it will respond in one of two distinct ways. Either it moves toward you, attempting to intensify its influence now that it knows you're aware, or it retreats because it recognizes the danger of being truly seen by conscious eyes. This movement, this immediate response to your observation, is your absolute confirmation that you're not imagining things. Your imagination doesn't react to being watched. Mental projections don't change behavior when you focus on them, but actual entities, beings with their own agenda and survival instincts, absolutely do respond when they realize they've been detected. It's the difference between looking at a photograph of a person and making eye contact with someone standing in your room. Once your eyes learn to detect these frequency ranges, you'll start noticing Archons everywhere. And I mean everywhere. The sheer commonality of them will shock you initially. Most people walk around with at least one entity attached to their energetic field at any given time. In emotionally dense environments, churches during intense services, government buildings where fear and bureaucracy concentrate, hospitals where pain and desperation pool, you'll count dozens of them clustered together like moths around flames. Your first clear sighting will most likely happen in your own home. You'll be sitting in your living room, practicing the soft gaze technique. When you catch movement in your peripheral vision, don't turn your head sharply. That breaks the altered state of perception you've cultivated. Instead, gently shift your softened gaze toward the corner where you sense the movement. There, pressed into the junction where wall meets ceiling, you'll see a dark shape hovering. It might appear as a dense shadow that doesn't match the room's lighting, or as that heat shimmer distortion I mentioned earlier. Most of the time, these home-dwelling Archons aren't actively attacking. They're observing, waiting with the patience of predators for specific emotional spikes: fear, anger, sexual arousal, or despair that provide the energetic food they need. Watch what happens when you generate one of those emotions. The moment you feel a surge of frustration or anxiety, that shadowy presence will move closer, positioning itself near your head or chest area. You'll experience this as a subtle but noticeable energetic drain, like someone just turned down your internal battery by 20%. The emotion that triggered its approach will intensify and linger longer than natural emotions typically do. But here's where visibility becomes your protection. The feeding stops the moment you're conscious of what's happening. Archons feed on unconscious emotional generation, the automatic, reactive feelings that surge through you without awareness or control. When you're watching the process happen, when you can see the entity positioning itself to feed, you've shifted from unconscious reaction to conscious observation. Conscious emotion doesn't provide the same energetic nourishment that unconscious emotion does. It's like the difference between someone stealing money from your wallet without you knowing versus you deliberately handing them cash while watching the transaction. The energy signature is completely different, and Archons can't properly metabolize conscious emotional states. This is why they prefer to remain invisible. An aware human is a protected human, not because of any special powers or shields, but because awareness itself changes the nature of your emotional output. You're no longer an unconscious energy source, you're a conscious being making deliberate choices about your internal states. The more you practice seeing them, the more you'll notice their behavioral patterns. They cluster around certain people more than others. Individuals who live in chronic emotional reactivity become walking buffets. They concentrate in locations where strong emotions are regularly generated. The customer service desk at government offices, hospital waiting rooms, the principal's office at schools, even certain sections of grocery stores where parents commonly struggle with difficult children. You'll also notice they have preferences for specific emotional flavors. Some Archons are drawn primarily to fear and anxiety. You'll see these hovering around people watching horror movies or reading disturbing news. Others prefer anger and frustration. These cluster around traffic jams, political rallies, and contentious family gatherings. The sexual variety gravitates toward areas where arousal and shame intersect: strip clubs, certain internet browsing sessions, or anywhere sexual energy is generated without genuine intimacy or love. The key is to remain calm during your first sightings. Your natural instinct might be fear or revulsion, but remember that these emotional spikes are exactly what feeds them. Instead, maintain that soft, observational state you've cultivated. You're a scientist studying a previously unknown species, not a victim under attack. Document what you see, even if it's just mental notes. The size, the behavior, the location, the time of day. These details will help you understand the patterns governing archonic activity in your personal environment. Knowledge is power, and in this case, visibility is the first step toward reclaiming your energetic sovereignty. Once you've mastered the soft gaze technique and can identify those shadowy, semi-transparent forms we discussed, the real test begins when you step outside your controlled environment. What you'll witness in public spaces will fundamentally change how you understand human behavior and social dynamics. The first time you see an Archon attached to another person, it's genuinely disturbing. Picture this. You're in line at a coffee shop, practicing your peripheral awareness, when you notice something perched on the shoulder of the woman in front of you. It's that familiar, smoky, tentacled form we covered earlier, but this time, it's wrapped around someone else's head, like a parasitic crown. She's on her phone, and you hear her berating whoever's on the other end with unusual cruelty. As she speaks, you watch the Archon pulse with energy, its grip tightening around her temples. The moment she hangs up, her entire demeanor shifts. She looks confused, almost guilty, as if wondering where those harsh words came from. This is the hardest part of developing Archon sight. Realizing that the cruel, irrational, or self-destructive things people say often aren't originating from them at all. You'll start recognizing the difference between authentic human emotion and implanted thoughts. When someone suddenly snaps at a cashier, launches into road rage, or makes a comment that seems completely out of character, you'll see the Archonic influence pulse and feed off the negative energy it just generated. But Archons don't just attach randomly to individuals. Through careful observation, you'll notice they establish what I call anchor points, specific locations where they maintain consistent presence. These are spots where the dimensional veil is thin enough for them to hold stable form without expending too much energy. In your own home, you might find them in certain corners of rooms, doorways, thresholds, or near mirrors. They love transitional spaces because these represent psychological vulnerability points where people's mental guards are naturally lowered. The fascinating thing about anchor points is that once you identify them, you can clear them through pure awareness. No elaborate rituals or spiritual ceremonies needed. Simply look directly at the space, acknowledge what you're seeing, and speak clearly. I see you. You have no power here. Leave. Most of the time, they do leave. Not because you've banished them with some mystical authority, but because you've removed their primary advantage, invisibility. Archons are parasitic by nature, and parasites avoid hosts that can identify and resist them. The more disturbing sightings happen in crowded public spaces, shopping malls, subway stations, sports stadiums, concert venues, anywhere large numbers of people gather in emotionally charged states. In these environments, you'll witness archons behaving like sharks moving through schools of fish. They're not attached to specific individuals, but scanning the crowd for people broadcasting the frequencies they feed on. Fear, anger, despair, mindless consumption, tribal hatred. I remember watching this phenomenon at a busy airport during holiday travel delays. Stress levels were already elevated, people were frustrated, and the emotional atmosphere was thick with anxiety. I could see several archonic forms drifting through the terminal, and when they found suitable targets, the attachment process was almost instantaneous. A businessman who seemed relatively calm suddenly exploded at a gate agent. A mother started screaming at her children over something trivial. A couple began a vicious argument that escalated from nowhere. In each case, I watched the archon latch on, and within seconds, that person's entire demeanor changed. More tired, more agitated, more disconnected from their authentic self as the energy harvest began. The hardest part of developing this sight is the isolation it creates. You can't warn strangers without appearing completely insane. You're left to watch, bear witness, and maintain your own visibility practice. So archons can't do to you what they're doing to everyone around you who can't see. It's like being the only sober person at a party full of people who don't realize their drinks have been spiked. This awareness fundamentally changes how you navigate social situations. You start recognizing when someone's sudden mood shift or cruel comment isn't really coming from them. You develop compassion for people caught in archonic manipulation while simultaneously protecting yourself from becoming collateral damage. You learn to identify the environmental factors that make archonic attachment more likely. High stress, emotional vulnerability, crowded spaces with chaotic energy. The key insight here is that this isn't about becoming paranoid or seeing threats everywhere. It's about learning to navigate a visible field instead of defending blindly against invisible influences. When you can see what's happening, you can make conscious choices about where to place your attention, how to respond to others' behavior, and when to remove yourself from situations that have become archonically charged. Start practicing this visibility in low-stakes environments first. Observe the energy dynamics in coffee shops, grocery stores, or public transportation. Notice the anchor points in your own living space, and practice the direct acknowledgement technique. Build your observational skills gradually so that when you encounter more intense public situations, you're prepared to maintain your awareness without becoming overwhelmed by what you're witnessing. Remember, every person you see under archonic influence was once just like you, unaware of these parasitic attachments and their effects on human behavior. Your job isn't to save everyone, but to maintain your own clarity and serve as a stabilizing presence in spaces where others have lost their connection to authentic thought and emotion. When you can see archons with your physical eyes, something fundamental shifts in the power dynamic that has controlled humanity for millennia. This isn't just about gaining knowledge or understanding a hidden truth, it's about breaking the most essential mechanism of their entire operation, the harvest system that depends entirely on your unconscious participation. Think about how gaslighting works in human relationships. Someone does something harmful to you, but when you confront them, they convince you it never happened. They make you question your own memory, your own perception, your own sanity. Eventually, you stop trusting yourself and start accepting their version of reality. This is exactly how Archons have operated on a massive scale. Except they've had one crucial advantage. You couldn't see them. When someone attacks you physically, you can point to bruises, cuts, evidence. When someone steals from you, you can show what's missing. But when an Archon drains your energy, implants limiting thoughts, or manipulates your emotional state, what proof do you have? You feel exhausted, depressed, or anxious. But everyone around you, including medical professionals, treats these as internal problems, chemical imbalances, stress, poor lifestyle choices. You're left defending against an invisible enemy while being told the enemy doesn't exist. But the moment you can see them, actually watch an Archon attached to someone's energy field, observe it feeding, witness it react when discovered, everything changes. You're no longer fighting shadows. You're no longer questioning whether these attacks are real or imagined. You're watching the mechanism in real time, and that direct observation breaks their primary weapon, your doubt. Here's what terrifies them most about visibility. Conscious observation disrupts the feeding process itself. When you're unaware of an Archon's presence, your energy flows freely toward whatever emotional state they're cultivating. Fear, anger, despair, lust, these emotions generate specific frequencies they consume. But when you can see the entity manipulating your emotional state, your consciousness naturally pulls back. It's like catching someone with their hand in your wallet. The theft stops the moment you notice it happening. I've watched this phenomenon repeatedly. The instant an Archon realizes it's been seen, and they always know, when you're looking directly at them, their behavior changes dramatically. Some retreat immediately, others become more aggressive, trying to intensify the emotional manipulation before you can fully withdraw your energy. But none of them can maintain the same effortless feeding they enjoy when operating invisibly. This is why the technique Thoth taught is so precise, and why practicing it correctly matters enormously. Remember, soft gaze, low lighting, relaxed focus, peripheral awareness, 10 minutes daily for 7 days. Not meditation, not visualization, but actual visual perception of entities that exist in the same space you occupy, but at frequencies just outside normal human sight. The soft gaze is crucial because Archons exist in that liminal space between focused and unfocused vision. When you stare directly at something, you're using your foveal vision, the sharp, detailed sight at the center of your visual field. But Archons appear most clearly in your peripheral vision, where your eyes naturally detect movement and energy patterns rather than fixed forms. By softening your focus, you expand your visual awareness into these normally ignored ranges. Low lighting serves two purposes. First, it reduces the overwhelming input of reflected light that dominates normal vision, allowing you to perceive the subtle emanations of non-physical entities. Second, it activates your scotopic vision, the enhanced sensitivity your eyes develop in darker conditions. This isn't about creating spooky atmosphere. It's about optimizing your visual system for perception beyond the ordinary spectrum. The relaxed focus prevents the mental strain that actually blocks subtle perception. When you try too hard to see something, your mind creates interference patterns that obscure what you're looking for. It's like trying to remember a word that's on the tip of your tongue. The harder you grasp for it, the more elusive it becomes. Archons become visible through gentle, sustained attention, not forceful concentration. Peripheral awareness ties everything together. You're not looking for Archons in one specific location, but maintaining broad, soft attention across your entire visual field. They might appear as shadows that move independently of light sources, geometric patterns that shift and flow, or semi-transparent forms that seem to respond to your attention. Once you see your first Archon, once you watch it react to being perceived, you cross a threshold you can never uncross. You're no longer defending blind against unknown forces. You're navigating a visible field where you can track threats, understand patterns, and respond with precision. This visibility becomes a form of power that archons cannot take away from you, no matter what other tactics they employ. But seeing them is just the beginning. Advanced practitioners develop techniques for tracking archonic movement patterns, identifying different entity types, and implementing specific protection protocols based on direct observation rather than guesswork. They learn to read the energy signatures that indicate archonic presence before visual contact, to recognize the environmental conditions that make manifestation more likely, and to use their visibility as a foundation for more sophisticated defensive and offensive capabilities. This knowledge isn't meant to stay with you alone. Part of breaking the harvest system involves awakening other chosen ones to their own visual capabilities. When enough people can see archons directly, their entire operational framework collapses. They can no longer hide behind scientific materialism, religious dogma, or psychological explanations. They become what they actually are: visible parasites operating in plain sight. Your action plan is straightforward. First, commit to the 7-day practice exactly as described. No modifications, no shortcuts. No, I'll try it when I have more time. 7 consecutive days, 10 minutes each, following the precise technique. Second, understand that this is foundation-level training. Advanced seeing techniques and comprehensive protection protocols exist for those ready to develop these abilities further. Third, share this knowledge with others who demonstrate readiness to see beyond the veil. Tonight, find a quiet space in your home. Dim the lights until you can see clearly, but without harsh illumination. Sit comfortably and soften your gaze, allowing your vision to expand into broad, relaxed awareness. Spend 10 minutes simply observing your environment with this enhanced perception. You're not summoning anything or opening doorways. You're removing the filter that has hidden what's always been present around you. When you see your first archon, when you look directly at one and watch it react to being perceived, you'll understand why this knowledge has been suppressed so aggressively. You'll realize that questioning whether this is real becomes impossible when you're watching it happen. The gaslight goes out permanently when you can see the hand lighting it. Archons are here. They're visible, and Thoth gave chosen ones the key to see them. The only question remaining is whether you'll use it. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood."
All right, y'all. I want to thank you guys for viewing the audio with me. It was very insightful. There are a lot of people that tend to think that a lot of the stuff I say is just made up stuff, or I'm just talking out my ass. I'm absolutely not. I've actually done the research myself. I found out about these entities when I read the book by Carlos Castanedos. It's called The Journey to Islam. I advise some people to go get it in one of my older videos. I'm going to just continue to go on my journey. I'm not going to try to correct myself going forward because, like I say, a lot of this stuff I done my research. I know what I'm talking about. I'm not just talking out my butt. And if you don't agree with me, and if you're trying to find a reason to object or deflect or prove me wrong, then you might as well just leave. Because you're not going to win. You're not going to change. I've been doing my research for so many years, and I know exactly what I'm talking about, okay? So please do not embarrass yourself. Going forward, y'all, I wish all love and light to everyone. I hope that you take this information very serious with you going forward. It will change your life dramatically. I have to go ahead and finish out my day.